Hey, what's going on? And welcome back to the channel. Today I'd like to talk about a very dangerous woman. A woman you would never ever want to take your eyes off of. Her name is Sylvia Seegrist, and a real tragedy would strike at the hands of Sylvia. But in order to get into what transpired on that tragic day, we need to dive back into the past of Sylvia and see just how her life unraveled.
Born on July 31st, 1960, Sylvia was actually a bright child. She was very smart and a great student. She played the piano and she was very much into horseback riding, but not long after would all be well. Sylvia was sexually abused by her grandfather at the age of 8 years old. He would expose himself to her and fondle himself in front of her up until the age of 13, when Sylvia's mother Ruth would eventually find out. When discussed, Sylvia told her mother she didn't know just how intimate her and her grandfather's relationship was, as if she thought it was normal to have a relationship like that. And the worst part is, after her mother finds out, she still has to go see her grandfather. In 1975, she's now a teenager, and at 15, she starts acting out. She starts rebelling, staying out late, not listening, and she starts smoking weed at this point and just getting into all sorts of trouble. A year goes by, and one day in the middle of class, she takes off her shoes and starts pacing around the room as she's screaming. After the incident, she's sent to Institute of Pennsylvania Hospital, where she's diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Once she gets out and returns home, she immediately has another incident. She lashes out and hits her mom and gets recommitted, and this time she's sent to Haverford State Hospital. In 1978, her parents sign her up to attend Eastern University in St. David's, a Baptist church, but she gets kicked out early on for being promiscuous. In 1980, she meets with her therapist and throws a lit cigarette in her face, and because of that, she gets sent to Henneman Hospital, where she stays committed for a little while before being sent to Lansdowne Rehab, where she ends up stabbing her counselor. From there, she gets 6 months at Haverford State Mental Hospital for the incident. On November 17, 1982, her parents get her an apartment in Media, Pennsylvania, and not long after, her behavior gets really odd. She starts taping her shade shut, and her father comes to check on her, and while there, he snoops around and finds a handgun. So he confronts her about the handgun and says to her, "What do you plan on doing with this, Sylvia?" In which she replies, "I'm going to kill myself. But don't worry, I'm going to kill you and Mom first." 2 months later, and her father comes and visits her again and notices she's been spray painting the walls of her apartment. And she's been spray painting the words, "Kill them all," and "Kill, kill, kill." Later on that year, she enlists in the Army at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. As she's being inducted, she faces harassment from members of the other platoon, but she would soon be discharged. And in July of 1984, she would be in trouble with Springfield police for running around spray painting a bunch of crazy things onto the walls of many different places. In that same year, she beats up her mom and gets committed to Sacred Heart Hospital. After a little while, she's let out. And at this point, her parents don't know what to do with her, so they buy her a car, thinking it will somehow make her independent. Her mom takes her to the DMV to get her license, and while there, she strangles her mom, but she doesn't kill her. After the incident, she's committed once again in November of 1984, and then Christmas of 1984, she enrolls into Delaware County Community College, but never attends one class. And at this time, all she's wearing now are army fatigues and what can only be described as an Arab-style headdress. And in March of 1985, she walks into a Kmart trying to buy a rifle, but dressed as she is, she weirds the employees out, and they tell her they are out of stock, so they would not be able to sell her one. Within that time frame, she manages to get herself a job at a place called Dry Goods, but attacks her boss with a stapler, so she gets fired. Wherever she was, she would just scream, but she loved going to the Springfield Mall. She would spend a lot of time there, but she would harass people as they shopped and even the employees. She would walk around the mall sipping furniture polish, and as she would do that, she'd enter into stores screaming at mall employees, saying things like, "Turn the fucking lights off, it's too bright in here," or go up to customers confronting them about their shirts being too bright. She was constantly being escorted out by mall security, but she would just always come back. And around this time, she would be successful at purchasing a rifle at a store called Best Products. And when they asked her if she had a history of mental illness, she simply replied, "No," and on she went with her new rifle. During this time, she's also going to the library to translate books about bombs in Russian, and on October 27th, she goes to the gun range before going home, and a few days later, on October 29th, at 4 a.m., she calls her therapist screaming, saying, "Tell my mom I need a vacation," then hangs up. Later in the day, she's ranting to her mother about how she wants to take her on a vacation, and her mother says, "I'm not taking you on a vacation." So Sylvia jams her mother's checkbook right into her face. On October 30th, the day of the incident, she goes to the Springfield Mall to buy Halloween decorations before returning to her apartment to change into different clothes. And once she changes, she heads back over to the mall, arriving at 3:45 p.m. As soon as Sylvia gets out of her vehicle, she starts firing off rounds. And at the first man she fires at, she misses. So she fires at a woman outside of the entrance using the ATM. And she misses again. But the first guy she fired at in the parking lot runs over to her car and slashes her tire. He was able to notice what car she arrived in. Sylvia fires again just before entering the mall, killing a 2-year-old boy by the name of Rasaif Kosman, who was with his parents waiting to eat at a local restaurant. At this point, she officially enters the mall through the main entrance, and once inside, she fires into stores. Many customers are now fleeing from the sounds of gunfire, but a man by the name of Ernest Earl Trout would not be so lucky, as he would end up being her next victim. He either could not hear or just so happened to not hear the shots being fired, and sadly, he would die at the hands of Sylvia. Augusto Ferris would be the last victim to lose his life that day during Sylvia's killing spree. John Lawfer, a local graduate student, happened to be on a date at the mall and would come face to face with Sylvia, but would disarm her as she walked up to him and tried to raise her gun to shoot him. Lawfer was not only able to take the gun away from her, but forced her to a nearby store while he waited for the arrival of the mall security. The first guard who reached her asked her why she had just done what she did, and her reply was, "I'm a woman and I have family problems, and I have seizures, and my family makes me nervous." Shortly, a little while after, she was taken into custody. On March 6, 1986, Sylvia Seegrist was deemed competent to stand trial for the killings. She was found guilty through insanity, and she was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences for each victim she killed and 7 consecutive 10-year terms for each victim she had wounded. The judge said that she will spend the rest of her life in some form of incarceration. After Sylvia was sentenced, the judge asked her if she understood the charges against her, and she replied back to the judge, "Fuck you, I hope you starve, motherfucker."
It's truly terrifying what one individual is capable of doing. One individual is capable of changing history, whether that be negative or positive. In this story, it just so happens to be a negative one. Man, am I glad she is never getting out. Well, with that being said, if you've been watching me or you're finding my channel for the first time, I hope you subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Have a good one.